used to believe every word he whispered into my ear, that I was his world, his forever. For 2 years, I built dreams on the foundation of his promises. But one stolen glance, one message left open on his phone, shattered everything. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was betraying me with someone I trusted like a sister, my own cousin. That discovery burned deeper than any heartbreak I could have imagined. What followed wasn't just pain, it was a storm that would change all of us forever. Stay with me. This story will make you question love, loyalty, and blood ties. My name is Amelia Clark. I'm 27 and I live in Manchester, UK. For most of my 20s, I thought I was living in a fairy tale. My boyfriend, Daniel, was charming, attentive, and made me feel like I was the center of his universe. He would send me flowers at work, surprise me with weekend trips, and constantly remind me that I was the love of his life. Everyone around me envied what we had, especially my family. Among those who admired us was my cousin, Sophie, who was a year younger than me. She and I grew up more like sisters than cousins. We shared secrets, clothes, and childhood dreams. When I introduced her to Daniel, she smiled and told me I was lucky to have such a perfect man. Little did I know, behind that smile, she was planning to steal what I held dearest. Our families often gathered on weekends, and Sophie was always around. At first, I thought nothing of the way she laughed at Daniel's jokes or how he seemed unusually attentive when she spoke. I brushed off the uneasy feeling, blaming my imagination. After all, Daniel had sworn to me countless times that I was his world, and Sophie was blood. She would never hurt me. But small cracks began to appear. Late-night texts that Daniel claimed were work-related. Sophie suddenly becoming more secretive, hiding her phone when I entered the room. The tension was subtle but undeniable. One evening, Daniel came home later than usual, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked, he said he'd been working late at the office. I wanted to believe him so badly that I convinced myself I was overthinking. It wasn't until weeks later, when his phone buzzed while he was in the shower, that the truth began to unravel. A message lit up on his screen. "Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again. Love you. S." My heart stopped. S stood for one person, Sophie. The moment I saw Sophie's initial at the end of that message, my body went cold. My hands trembled as I held Daniel's phone, reading the words over and over, hoping I was wrong. But denial had no space left. The person who claimed to love me and the cousin I trusted like a sister were sneaking behind my back. When Daniel stepped out of the shower, I couldn't even look at him the same way. His smile, his casual kiss on my forehead, it all felt like poison. I wanted to scream, to confront him right then, but I froze. A voice inside me whispered, "Wait, don't let them know you've caught on. Find out the truth first." That night, I barely slept. Every memory of Sophie suddenly felt tainted. The times she came over to help me with work, the way she offered to stay late after family dinners, the sly glances I had ignored. My heart ached, but my anger grew stronger. Over the next week, I quietly gathered evidence. I checked Daniel's phone when he left it unattended, and I noticed patterns. Late-night calls, all saved under fake names. Calendar entries marked as meetings. And the worst, photos. Blurry selfies of Sophie and Daniel in his car, smiling, their faces too close. Each discovery was like a knife to my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to know how deep this betrayal went. The final confirmation came during a family gathering at my aunt's house. I watched Sophie slip out of the living room, her phone buzzing in her hand. Minutes later, Daniel excused himself to take a work call. My instincts screamed. Quietly, I followed. Through the half-open kitchen door, I saw them, Sophie's hand brushing against Daniel, as he whispered something that made her giggle. The sight shattered me. My cousin, my blood, leaning into the man who promised me forever. I stepped back before they noticed, my chest heaving, tears burning my eyes. At that moment, I knew one thing: this wasn't just betrayal. This was war. And I was no longer going to be the silent victim. I walked out of that kitchen that night with a decision burning inside me. No more tears. No more silence. If Daniel and Sophie thought they could make a fool of me, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. For days, I played my role perfectly. To Daniel, I was the loving girlfriend who trusted him completely. To Sophie, I was the cousin who had no clue. I smiled at family dinners, laughed at his jokes, even hugged her when she pretended to check on me. Inside, though, every gesture was fuel for the fire I was preparing. I started with small steps. I backed up every incriminating message, every picture, every call log I found on Daniel's phone. Screenshots, recordings, even timestamps, nothing was left out. I stored it all in a hidden folder under a password only I knew. Then I went further. One evening, while Daniel was in the shower, I used his laptop. He had synced his email with Sophie's. Their plans laid out in black and white. Hotel bookings, weekend getaways, excuses they coordinated to cover their tracks. My hands shook with rage, but I saved everything. The hardest part was facing my family, knowing Sophie was smiling at me while secretly stabbing me in the back. But I knew that when the truth came out, her mask would shatter. My plan took shape slowly, expose them both at the perfect moment. Not in a quiet confrontation where they could twist the story, but in front of everyone who mattered. The opportunity came faster than I expected. My mother's birthday dinner was only 2 weeks away. The whole family would be there, Sophie, Daniel, and all the people who had always believed in us as a couple. It would be the perfect stage. In the meantime, I practiced patience. I let Daniel think his lies were working. I let Sophie think she was clever. But inside, I replayed the moment of truth in my mind. The way their faces would crumble, the way the whispers would spread across the room, the way I would finally take back my dignity. The countdown had begun, and I was ready to watch their world collapse. The night of my mother's birthday arrived. The house was glowing with warm lights, laughter echoing from the dining room, and the smell of roasted lamb filling the air. Everyone was dressed in their finest, smiles plastered across their faces, including Sophie and Daniel. They looked so comfortable, so confident in their lies, that it made my stomach twist. I wore a red dress that evening, one I had saved for a special occasion. Tonight wasn't about celebrating my mother's birthday only. It was about reclaiming my voice. The dinner began with the usual toasts and stories. My mother was radiant, sipping her wine, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Daniel sat next to me, his hand brushing mine under the table like nothing was wrong. Across from me, Sophie leaned back in her chair, laughing loudly, her eyes occasionally flicking toward Daniel in a way only I seemed to notice. My heart pounded, but I kept smiling, playing my part until the moment felt right. And then, when the cake was brought out and everyone gathered around, I stood. My voice trembled at first, but then it grew steady, fueled by months of betrayal. "I'd like to make a toast," I began, raising my glass. The chatter stopped, all eyes on me. To truth, to family, and to the things we think are hidden until they are. Confused murmurs rippled through the room. Sophie shifted uncomfortably, and Daniel frowned. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. With a few taps, the television in the living room flickered on. I had prepared a slideshow, screenshots of messages, photos, even hotel confirmations. And there, in bold clarity, was the truth. Daniel and Sophie's affair laid bare for everyone to see. Gasps filled the room. My aunt dropped her fork, my father froze mid-bite, and my mother's face turned pale as the images scrolled. Sophie's smug smile vanished, replaced by sheer panic. Daniel stammered, his face draining of color. "This," I said, my voice sharp as a knife, "is the man who promised me loyalty. And this is the cousin who swore she was my sister in every way that mattered. Happy birthday, Mum, here. The truth your daughter deserved years ago." The silence was deafening. Sophie burst into tears. Daniel tried to grab my arm, but I pulled back. The room wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. And for the first time, I felt powerful. The room erupted into chaos. My mother clutched her chest as if trying to hold her heart together. My father's jaw tightened, his hands trembling with barely contained rage. Relatives exchanged shocked whispers, some staring at Sophie in disgust, others at Daniel in disbelief. Sophie shot to her feet, tears streaming down her face. "Amelia, please, it's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I cut in, my voice steady but laced with fire. Do you think I fabricated hotel bookings or wrote love messages to myself? Everyone here can see the truth. Daniel stood next, his face flushed. Amelia, listen, I made mistakes, but I still love you. We can work this out. Work this out? My laughter was sharp, bitter. You've been sleeping with my cousin for months. On the nights you told me you were working late, you were busy betraying me. You shattered every vow, every promise, every piece of trust I gave you. Sophie collapsed back into her chair, hiding her face in her hands. My mother's voice trembled as she finally spoke. Sophie, how could you do this to your own family? But Sophie couldn't answer. The weight of her shame silenced her. Daniel reached for me again, his desperation growing. Don't do this in front of everyone. Let's talk privately, please. I stepped back, holding my ground. No, Daniel, that's what you've always wanted, secrets hidden in shadows. Tonight, the truth lives in the light. Everyone deserves to know the kind of man you are. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some openly glaring at him. My uncle muttered, disgraceful. My father slammed his hand against the table so hard the glasses rattled. You've humiliated our family, he shouted, his voice cracking with fury. Daniel paled, realizing he had no allies left. The more he tried to defend himself, the more hollow his words sounded. It just happened. I didn't mean to fall in love with her. In love, I repeated, shaking my head. Don't dress betrayal in pretty words. It was selfishness, nothing more. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Sophie's sobs. I straightened, my shoulders squared. This chapter of my life ends tonight. You don't get another chance. You don't get me, ever again. The applause that came from one corner startled me. It was my aunt, her eyes wet with tears. Finally, she whispered. Finally, Amelia stands for herself. And in that moment, I knew my story wasn't ending. It was only beginning. The days following my confrontation with Ryan and my cousin felt like a blur, but slowly, the fog began to lift. The truth was painful, yes, but it was also liberating. For months, I had unknowingly built my life around a lie. Now, with everything exposed, I had no reason to hold onto something so toxic. At first, the silence of my room felt unbearable. Nights were the hardest. I would replay Ryan's words in my head, his promises of forever, his declarations of love, and then the image of him with my cousin would pierce through, shattering me all over again. But I also realized something important. I had survived worse nights before, and I could survive this too. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. For so long, I had defined my worth by how Ryan saw me, how he held me, how he spoke to me. But now, I saw a woman who had been betrayed and yet was still standing tall. I saw someone who had been broken, but not destroyed. And in that reflection, I began to find my strength again. I started journaling my feelings, every hurt, every memory, every anger-filled thought. Slowly, those words on paper became a roadmap of my healing. I began spending more time with friends who truly cared for me, people who lifted me up instead of tearing me down. Their presence reminded me of what real love and support looked like, and it was nothing like the false love Ryan had given me. As weeks passed, I began to let go of the bitterness. It wasn't easy. I still felt a sting whenever I thought of my cousin, and sometimes my heart ached when Ryan's name crossed my mind. But I refused to give them the power to dictate my happiness. My future was mine, not theirs. One evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a quiet peace wash over me. That's when I realized betrayal had broken my heart, but it had also set me free. Ryan swore I was his world, but in truth, I had always been my own world. I just needed to see it, and now I finally did.